Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're not just talking about a we are, really talking about a battlefield.
That's a good way to put it.
We are looking at what is arguably the most significant cultural touchstone of the last 30, Harry Potter, and how its upcoming adaptation for HBO has become, well, a proxy war for much larger, much fiercer societal debate.
It really has. It's fascinating because, on the surface, if you just glance at the headline, we are simply talking about casting news.
Right.
A veteran actor gets a role, standard industry stuff. But once you peel back that layer, you find arguments about theology, biology, the definition of kindness, and the very nature of truth itself.
It gets deep. And it gets deep fast. And the catalyst for today's dive is the recent announcement that the legendary John Lithgow has been cast as Albus Dumbledore.
A huge role.
Huge. Now, usually, casting a titan of acting like Lithgow, someone with his pedigree, his gravitas, that would just be met with universal applause. You'd expect champagne corks popping.
Sure, yeah. An easy win for the studio.
But we are looking at a highly critical reaction.
Right. So the main source we're analyzing today is a transcript from a commentary outlet called the Trent Report. The video itself is titled, "John Lithgow Shares Concerning Comments About New Harry Potter TV Series."
And you have to note the capitalization.
Oh, yeah. The capitalization of the word concerning in all caps. It should give you a pretty good hint about the vibe here. It's not subtle.
The Trent Report isn't just offering, a movie review or a simple reaction video. They are offering a warning.
A series.
They see Lithgow's casting, and specifically the things Lithgow has said in recent interviews, as a series of massive red flags. They view this as a potential disaster in the making.
Exactly. The source material we have lays out a very specific, very structured argument that the production of this new show is fundamentally at odds with the moral universe of the original books.
At odds.
Deeply. They believe the show is being captured, piece by piece by what they call the woke zeitgeist.
So our mission today is to unpack that argument. And we have to be clear, we aren't here to say who is right or wrong politically. We aren't taking sides in the culture. We are here to understand the clash itself. Why does John Lithgow find J.K. Rowling's
And on the other side, why does the Trent Report find Lithgow's definition of kindness to be false compassion?
And the big one, is the author, J.K. Rowling, actually involved in this show, or has she been quietly silent?
That last one is a genuine mystery we need to try and solve. It's, I think, the smoking gun of this whole discussion.
So let's dive in. Let's start with the man of the hour, John Lithgow. The source material gives us some crucial context on where he was when he made the comments that, started this firestorm.
He was at the International Film Festival, Rotterdam. And it's worth noting, he wasn't there explicitly for a Harry Potter panel or anything.
No, this wasn't a press junket for the show.
Not at all. He wasn't sitting in front of a Gryffindor banner. He was promoting a different film entirely, an indie film called Jimpa.
And right away, the Trent Report flags this context as significant. To them, the movie Jinpa isn't just another movie on his resume.
They do. The source refers to Jinpa specifically as a gay propaganda film.
Yeah.
Now, that characterization is important because it establishes the lens through which the source views Lithgow's entire career.
I see. So it's about his alignment.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They don't see him just as a neutral actor taking a gig. They see him as someone already aligned with a specific cultural and political agenda. So to the source, his participation in a film like Jinpa is, evidence of his worldview before he even opens his mouth about Dumbledore.
So Lithgow is there promoting this film. He's in this artistic international environment. And naturally, the press wants to talk about Dumbledore. It's the biggest role in the world right now.
Of course.
And Lithgow decides to address the elephant in the room. He doesn't dodge it at all.
No, he walks right into it. He brings up the controversy surrounding J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
And for anyone who has somehow missed this refers to her very vocal stance on sex and gender, specifically her belief in the biological immutability of sex and her concerns regarding transactions.
It's been the defining narrative around her for years now. It's almost bigger than the book.
It almost is. So Lithgow admits he takes this controversy extremely seriously.
Yeah.
But then he says something that becomes the fulcrum of this entire debate. I think that it's important to read the quote from our source material so we get it exactly right. He says, "I find it ironic and somewhat inexplicable that Rowling has expressed such views."
Inexplicable. That is a very heavy word.
It does a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, doesn't it?
It really does. It implies a deep confusion. It implies that he cannot make sense of it. It's not just disagreement. It's like it's a puzzle he can't solve.
Exactly. And Lithgow goes on to explain why he finds it so inexplicable. He pivots directly to the content of the book. He describes the Harry Potter canon as a great meditation on kindness, empathy, and acceptance.
Those three words.
Kindness, empathy, acceptance. He also talks about the story being a clear battle of good versus evil, kindness versus cruelty.
So in Lithgow's mind, there is this massive unbridgeable disconnect. He looks at the books and sees a manual for inclusion.
A blueprint for it.
A blueprint for it, yeah. He sees a story that says, we should accept everyone, the outcast, the muggle-born. And then he looks at the author and he hears her saying things that he perceives as exclusionary, as unkind. And he's basically saying, how can the person who wrote this believe that?
It's the classic death of the author dilemma playing out in real time right in front of us. Lithgow is essentially arguing that the work has outgrown the creator's personal apology. He's aligning himself with the themes of the book, as he understands specifically his modern interpretation of those themes, while at the same time distancing himself from the woman who wrote them.
It's like he's hugging the book while pushing away the author.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Now, as you can imagine, the Trent Report hears this, and they are not having, not even a little bit.
No. The source completely reject this idea that Rowling's views are inexplicable. In fact, they argue the exact opposite. They say her views are entirely.
And this is where the conversation gets extremely intense.
The source comes in very hot here. This isn't a polite academic disagreement.
Not in the slightest. To the commentator on the Trent Report, this isn't a matter of hatred or intolerance, which is sort of how Lithgow and his side would frame it. To the source, this is a matter of objective reality.
Just plain facts to them.
Just plain facts. The source states quite clearly, quote, men cannot become women, women cannot become men. To them, this is a fundamental biological truth, as obvious and unchangeable as gravity. There's no debate to be had.
And the language the source uses to describe the opposing side, the side that Lithgow is sympathizing with, is incredibly intense. I mean, they are not mincing words.
No, they aren't. They focus on the medical transition of minors, specifically, and they use phrases like butchering children and butchering people. They describe the ideology that supports these medical treatments as insanity and wicked and evil stuff.
We have to pause on that intensity for a second because this really explains why the two sides are just talking past each other.
Completely.
Lithgow thinks the debate is about manners or kindness. He seems to think Rowling is being rude or unaccepting.
Right. His framework is social etiquette, basically. Whereas the source thinks the debate is about survival and truth.
A much higher stake.
Much higher. If you truly believe that children are being physically harmed by a medical ideology, butchered, as they put it, then acceptance isn't a virtue. In that context, resistance becomes the virtue. You don't accept what you see as profound harm, you try to stop it.
So when Lithgow says, I don't understand why she says these things, the source hears that as Lithgow being either willfully blind or totally captured by an ideology they view as dangerous.
Precisely. The source is essentially shouting at the screen saying, she says these things because they are true, and you are ignoring reality. To them, Lithgow's confusion isn't just confusion, it's evidence that he is living in a cultural and intellectual bubble.
This friction then leads to a really big question regarding Lithgow's involvement. If he finds the creator so problematic and he finds her views so inexplicable, why on earth did he take the job?
Especially for an 8-year commitment. It's a huge part of his life now.
Why sign up for that? And Lithgow actually answers this in the interview, and his answer provides the source with even more ammunition.
He does. Lithgow admits that people were actively insisting he walk away from.
So there's pressure.
A lot of pressure. He says that pressure made him uncomfortable and unhappy. He clearly wrestled with the decision.
But he stayed.
He stayed. And the reason he gives is absolutely crucial to this whole debate. He says he stayed because of the remarkable people turning the books into the series. He places all the emphasis on the new creative.
Now, to a normal listener, that sounds like a standard Hollywood compliment. You know, I love the team, great guys, so happy to be here. But the source identifies this specific comment as a major, major red flag. Why?
Because of the context we just established. The Force interprets this compliment as a dog whistle, almost. They believe Lithgow is essentially saying, I'm staying because the new people, the writers, the showrunners, they aren't like Rowling.
Ah, I see. So he's really saying, I'm safe here because the production team agrees with me, not with her.
That's the interpretation from the source, 100%. The source believes Lithgow is hinting that the production team is going to fix the story, that they're going to align the show with the kindness and acceptance ideology that Lithgow likes and scrub away the traditional or biological worldview that Rowling holds.
It's like he's saying, don't worry, everyone. The bad author is gone. The good writers are here now.
Exactly. And that thought absolutely terrifies the source.
Yeah.
Because if the writers are fixing the story, that means they are changing. And for them, that's the ultimate betrayal.
This is fascinating because it moves us from what could be just celebrity gossip into a really deep philosophical debate. And this brings us right into the second main segment of our dive, the battle over the definition of the word kindness.
This was the part of the source material I found the most intellectually dense, because both Lithgow and the Trent Report are using the same English word. They're both saying they want love and kindness.
Right.
But they mean completely fundamentally different things. It's a linguistic impact.
So let's break it down. For Lithgow, he groups kindness, empathy, and acceptance together. They're a pack.
Right. For Lithgow, and for the modern progressive worldview he seems to represent in this context, kindness is more or less synonymous with affirmation.
What do you mean by that?
It means making space for people. It means validating their identity. It's a very interpersonal, emotional definition of the word. If you make someone feel excluded, you are being unkind. If you make someone feel invalidated, you are lacking empathy. The feeling is the metric.
Okay, so it's about emotional validation, but the source challenges this directly. They explicitly say, I don't know if I really see that, referring to Lithgow's version of...
They don't see it at all.
Yeah.
And to back up their argument, they reach back into theology. They bring up Bishop Sheen.
Fulton Sheen, the famous Catholic television personality from the mid-20th century. That is a very specific traditionalist reference.
It is. You don't hear Bishop Sheen quoted in Variety magazine reviews very often.
No, you do not. So the source brings up Bishop Sheen's concept of false compassion. That is a term that really sticks. False compassion. What does that mean?
The source summarizes it very bluntly as pity for the murderer instead of the victim.
Wow, that puts a fine point on it.
It does. The idea is that true compassion must be rooted in justice and in truth. If your compassion leads you to excuse evil behavior or to tolerate things that are harmful simply because you want to be nice or because you want to understand the perpetrator's pain,
then it's not actually compassion.
It's not. The source argues it's moral cowardice. It's false. It's a cheap imitation of the real thing.
It's the idea that being nice can sometimes enable bad.
Exactly. The source doesn't use this example, but think of it this way. If a doctor refuses to perform a painful surgery because they don't want to hurt the patient in the short term, they aren't being compassionate. They're letting the patient die.
That's a great analogy.
That's false compassion. True compassion acts for the ultimate good of the person, even if it's painful or difficult in the moment.
So how do they apply this to Harry Potter? Because, it's a wizard story, not a medical drama.
The source argues that Harry Potter is not a story about accepting everyone. It's a story about moral absolute. You don't accept Voldemort.
Of course not.
You don't empathize with the Death Eaters in a way that allows them to continue their reign of terror. You fight them. You reject them. The source argues that Lithgow's lens of acceptance, when taken to its logical conclusion, blurs that critical line between good and evil.
The source seems to worry that Lithgow's version of empathy slope.
That's exactly it. They fear that if you prioritize empathy above all else, you lose the ability to condemn evil. The source uses the word wicked. They argue that Lithgow's worldview leads to a society where we are so busy trying to understand the villain's trauma that we forget to protect the victim.
And to prove this point, to prove what true love and true kindness look like in the Harry Potter universe, the source brings up a very character, and it's not Dumbledore.
No, it's Severus Snape.
This is a critical part of their argument. The source holds up Snape as the model of love.
Which is so counterintuitive.
He really is. Snape is a bully. He mocks Harry's fame from day one. He insults Hermione's teeth. He's terrifying. He is the teacher that everyone hated and was afraid of.
The source acknowledges all of that. They don't try to sugarcoat him. They admit he is standoffish, aloof, and harsh. They even say he's not lovey-dovey. They are pretending he's a nice guy you'd want to get a butterbeer with. But the source argues Snape is not cruel. Or rather, his ultimate actions are acts of supreme love. And why? Because he protects Harry.
Against all odds.
He keeps him alive. He sacrifices his own safety, his reputation, his social standing, and eventually his life, all to ensure the good of the boy he supposedly hates.
So the definition of love here, according to the source, is willing the good of the other.
Exactly. Willing the good of the other, regardless of how it feels in the moment. It's an objective, action-based definition of love, not a subjective, feeling-based.
Snape didn't make Harry feel good.
Not for a single second. But he made sure Harry survived to fulfill his destiny.
That is a stark contrast. So, in the source's view, Snape represents real kindness because he does the hard, necessary thing. Whereas Lithgow's version of kindness, this acceptance model, might be softer and more pleasant, but it lacks that moral backbone.
Right. The source worries that this false idea of compassion, this modern be nice to everyone ethos, is going to fundamentally warp the show. They fear that Lithgow and the writers will try to soften the edges of the moral universe.
What would that look like in practice?
Maybe they'll make the villains more sympathetic. Maybe they'll make the heroes more tolerant. in a way that directly contradicts the book's stark morality.
They're afraid Dumbledore will try to sit down and have a therapy session with Voldemort instead of dueling him to the death.
Essentially, yeah. They fear the show will prioritize understanding over defeating. And in a story about, let's be honest, a wizard Hitler, that's a big, big problem for the source.
It's a clash of worlds. One prioritizes inclusion and feelings. The other prioritizes moral duty and objective truth. And they are fighting over the soul of a children's book.
And that philosophical clash, that big abstract debate, it manifests in very physical, tangible complaints about the production itself, which brings us to the red flags the source has identified.
Yeah, let's talk about the production changes, because it's not just Lithgow's words that have the source upset. It's the actual casting, specifically the casting of Severus Snape.
Right, the actor Papa Isidore has been cast as Snape. He's a fantastic actor known for his work in I May Destroy You and Games of London, critically acclaimed.
And the source is not happy about this.
No, the source explicitly calls this a huge, huge red flag. They refer to it as race swapping.
Now, we need to analyze this argument carefully, because to a lot of listeners, casting a black actor as Snape might just seem like colorblind cast, or just finding the best talent.
Sure, best actor for the job.
Why is this a red flag for the source? Are they just being racist?
The source frames it as an issue of fidelity. They argue that when you start changing the physical descriptions of characters from the book, abandoning fidelity, as they put it, it's usually a canary in the coal mine.
A sign of things to come.
A sign that you are abandoning fidelity to the story's core values as well. They see the physical description as the first layer of the author's intent. If you're willing to change that, what won't you change?
They call it a slippery slope.
Exactly. The source asks rhetorically, when has there ever been a show that was actually faithful to the book when they immediately started race-swapping characters? They are challenging the listener to find an example where visual changes didn't ultimately lead to narrative and thematic.
So for them, casting a black actor as Snape isn't just an aesthetic choice or a best actor for the job choice. It's a signal, a smoke signal that the whole project is compromised.
It's a signal that the production is prioritizing modern diversity standards, what the source calls the woke zeitgeist, over the source material. It suggests to them that the showrunners care more about reflecting our current world than faithfully depicting Rowling's world as it was written.
The source actually traces this woke zeitgeist back to a specific time period, which I found interesting.
They do. They link it culturally to the Obama era, somewhere around 2008 or 2010. They see this casting choice as a symptom of a cultural shift that occurred then. They believe it indicates that the showrunners care more about modern political signaling, checking diversity boxes, than they do about respecting J.K. Rowling's original vision.
And they have other examples to back this up, right? It's not just the Snape casting. They see a pattern emerging.
Oh yeah, they definitely see a pattern. The source points to the video game Hogwarts Legacy, which came out recently, around 2023.
Oh, right, the big open world game. It was a massive hit, sold millions and millions of copies.
A massive hit, but the source flags a specific detail in that game. They mention a character, a bartender or a tavern owner in Hogsmeade named Serona Ryan, who was presented as a transgender woman.
I remember that being a news story. The character had a deeper voice and had some lines of dialogue about being recognized as a witch rather than a wizard.
And the source views that character's inclusion as proof that the Harry Potter IP is already being captured by this ideology. They argue that the franchise is already being used to inject gender ideology.
So connect the dots for us. Lithgow praises the remarkable writer. The video game had a trans character. Snape is race swap. What is the source predicting will happen to the TV show based on these data?
They are predicting the welcomeifying of the show.
Welcome up. I have to stop on that word. It's a strange neologism I've never heard. What does the source mean by that?
It's a really cynical, but I think a fascinating term. The source uses it to describe the process of taking something exclusive, distinct, or culturally specific and sanding down all the edges so that everyone feels welcome.
And in doing so, you ruin what made it special in the first place.
Exactly. I mean, think about a local dive bar that gets bought out and turned into a chain restaurant. It's cleaner, it's safer, it's more welcoming to families, but it completely lost its soul.
It's sterile.
The source believes that stories work the same way. If you make a story inclusive to every modern identity, you lose the specific texture of the original story. You turn a British boarding school story from the 1990s into a sort of modern global village HR
Powerful. The source fears that the specific Britishness or moral flavor of the book will be diluted to make it palatable for a modern.
And specifically, the source fears that the show is going to push queer theory in the name of being welcoming.
And this brings us full circle right back to Dumbledore, because Dumbledore is the character where queer theory would most naturally fit into the narrative.
Right. The source brings up the fact that J.K. Rowling retroactively stated that Dumbledore was gay. This wasn't explicitly in the book. It was subtext at best for most readers. But she said it in an interview after the final book was published.
A lot of fans know this. For better or worse, it's considered canon now.
But the source is deeply concerned, disturbed, is the word they use, about how this might be depicted in the show.
What specifically are they worried about? Seeing Dumbledore go on a date, a flashback to his relationship with Grindelwald.
It's darker than that, in their view. They are worried about the relationship between Dumbledore and Harry. The source calls the potential incorporation of Dumbledore's sexuality into the show, specifically in relation to his mentorship of Harry, disgusting and extraordinarily disturbing.
That's very strong language. That implies they think the show might sexualize that dynamic or twist it in some way.
It seems so. Or at the very least, they fear that by viewing Dumbledore through the lens of queer theory, the show will subvert the traditional, what they would see as a wholesome mentor-mentee relationship. They worry that everything will be read through a lens of power dynamics and sexuality.
It sounds like a complete rejection of a certain kind of academic or modern reading of the text.
Completely. They call it a total turnoff that would ruin the entire series. It seems like the source is operating from a position of extreme distrust. They simply do not believe the showrunners are capable of handling these topics with care or respect for the original story.
Trust is non-existent here. Zero. They view the showrunners as ideologues who want to deconstruct the story, not adapt it. And that lack of trust is fueled by the confusion over who is in charge.
Which brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle, the mystery of J.K. Rowling's involvement.
This is the part that really confused me when I was going through our source, because I remember when this show was announced, the whole selling point was J.K. Rowling is an executive producer. She's watching everything.
That was the shield.
That was the shield against fan backlash.
Yeah.
That was the guarantee of quality and fidelity.
That was the official narrative. And the Trent Report walks us through the timeline of that narrative very clearly.
Yeah.
April 2023, Rowling releases a statement. She says Max's commitment to preserving the integrity of the books is important to her. She says she's looking forward to being part of the adaptation.
Okay, so she's on board. She's giving it her blessing.
Then later, HBO boss Casey Bloys comes out and says she was very, very involved in selecting the writer and director. IndieWire then reports she had opinions on cast.
So it sounds like she's in the driver's. Sounds like nothing happens without her say-so.
And even as recently as July of last year, so July 2025, Rowling posted on X, formerly Twitter, that she worked closely with the writers, though she did admit she wasn't writing the scripts herself.
So the official story from all official channels is Rowling is in control. So why is the source panicked? Why are they so worried about a woke injection if the author is standing right there at the gate?
Because of John Lithgow. In this new interview, the one that sparked this whole thing, Lithgow drops a bomb. He says, and this is a direct quote, "She's not really involved in this production at all."
Not really involved at all. That is a direct contradiction. That's not a nuance. That's a flat-out denial of the entire official...
It is.
Yeah.
And he goes even further. Lithgow implies that the creative vision is coming entirely from these remarkable new people he met. He says he learned new things about the character of Dumbledore, mainly because of these people who are creating the series, implying they are bringing things to the table that aren't from Rowling or the book.
So we have the HBO executives and Rowling's own statements on one side saying she's involved and the lead actor on the other side saying she's not. Who is telling the truth?
The Trent Report believes Lithgow is telling the truth.
Really? Even though they disagree with basically everything else he stands for?
Yes, because Lithgow's statement confirms the source's worst fear, that J.K. Rowling has been sidelined. The source suggests that despite all the PR spin, the writers are just doing their own thing.
And why would Lithgow admit that if it wasn't true? What's his motivation?
Exactly. He has no reason to lie about it. In fact, from his perspective, he probably thinks it's a good thing. He's excited that this remarkable team is taking the reign. He likely sees Rowling's absence as a liberation for the production. But for the anti-woke fans represented by the source, this is a catastrophe. This is a five-alarm fire.
Because if Rowling isn't involved, the veto power they all hoped she had simply doesn't exist.
Right. The fans assumed she would be the firewall. They thought she would be there to say, no, you can't race swap Snape, or no, you can't put gender ideology in the script. If Lithgow is telling the truth, that safety net is gone. The castle is unguarded.
And that explains the panic. The source feels like the castle walls have been breached and they didn't even know it.
Precisely. To the source, Lithgow's comments are an accidental confession. He thinks he's praising the team for being fresh and innovative, but the source hears him admitting that the original author has been ousted to make room for a political agenda.
It's amazing how a few off-the-cuff sentences from an actor at a film fest in Rotterdam can spiral into this massive existential crisis for an entire fan.
It just speaks to how important these stories are and how deeply polarized our culture has become. We aren't just watching a show anymore. We are watching a proxy war over value. Every casting choice, every line of dialogue is going to be scrutinized for evidence of which side is winning.
So let's just recap here. We've broken down the actors' comments, the deep philosophical debate over the meaning of kindness, the production red flags about casting, and now the central mystery of the author's presence.
We have. And it's a lot to digest, a real mind.
I want to circle back to something the source said that really stuck with me. They mention that question of fidelity.
The fidelity to the text, yeah.
Yeah, the source asks, and it feels like a genuine question, if it's even possible to have a faithful adaptation in the current cultural climate.
In what they call the woke zeitgeist.
Right. And this is a really profound question for you to think about. Is the air we breathe culturally just too different from the air in 1997 when the first book came out? Can a story survive that kind of transition intact?
Or does the story inevitably change to reflect the time it is being retold in? The source would argue that if the culture is sick or insane, which is the strong language they use, then any adaptation produced by that culture will necessarily be infected by it. It won't be pure. It will be a distorted reflection.
Whereas John Lithgow would argue the exact opposite. He would say the adaptation is an opportunity to expand the story's kindness to include more people, to update it, to make it better in his...
Exactly. Lithgow sees the cultural shift as progress. He sees the 1990s as a time of limitation, and today as a time of open. The source sees the 90s as a time of sanity, and today as a time of chaos.
And here's the provocative thought I want to leave you with. We talked about who owns the story. Is it J.K. Rowling? Is it the showrunners?
Or is it the audience that buys the books and the tickets?
But let's go a step further. If Lithgow is correct that Rowling is absent, and if the source is correct that major changes are imminent, who actually owns the soul of a story? Is it the creator who wrote it in a coffee shop 30 years ago? Or is it the culture that adopts it, adapts it, and uses it to fight their own battles decades?
Does the wizard belong to the author or to the world?
And if he belongs to the world of the Trent Report with its demand for objective truth and moral absolute, or the world of John Lithgow with its focus on empathy and inclusion?
That is the question HBO is going to have to answer with this series.
Yeah.
And whatever answer they choose, it feels like half the audience is going to be furious.
It seems inevitable at this point. The battle lines are drawn and the show hasn't even aired yet.
We'll be watching
And we will be diving deep into whatever happens next. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.